What's up, y'all, and welcome to Durag Thoughts. My name is Trevor Went. I'm a visual artist raised in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I make art to challenge perspectives and give hope to the marginalized and oppressed. And this space, Durag Thoughts, is a space where we talk about concepts and topics that do just that, give hope to marginalized and oppressed peoples. And this is season 2, and we've been rocking through my series, City of God, that y'all have been seeing come out over the past, I guess it's 2 weeks that y'all have seen some stuff from this. And we're gonna keep going along with that. You watched Return Road at the beginning of the week, and if you haven't watched it, you should go back and watch it. And we're gonna just talk about some of the themes and concepts surrounding that today in this episode. And my guest for today is the discipleship minister at a church that I'm not gonna tell you where it is right now because you don't need to know all that information because people's lives are sometimes private. And has been one of my good friends for the past, gosh, how many years has it been? Seminary is 4 years long, so it's like closing in on 5 years. Dude I met early on in seminary, was a really like grounding force for me. Is like for real, it was a close friend through the point where I moved to Raleigh and kept coming back. Has been a close friend since then. I got to shoot this dude's wedding. This dude is super thoughtful individual, incredibly intelligent individual. I would say that he's a king of fly fishing, but I don't know fly fishing that well, but he's a king in my eyes in fly fishing. A man that is thrifty beyond reason and has also been, especially let me say this as I introduce him. When I came into seminary, I spotted people in the room instantly who had good fashion sense because it's just something that pops out to me. And so it was like this dude instantly popped out to me because he's super tall. And if you know anything about tall people, it's really, really difficult to find clothes that fit you correctly if you're very tall. And so to see someone who was tall and stylish as like, it's instantly going to catch your eye. And so I spent a lot of time with this dude, broke a lot of bread with this dude. I've gained a lot of wisdom from him and have always had super thoughtful conversations. So I'm glad to introduce to y'all my homie, Henry Boyd. What's up, dog?
Hey guys, what's going on, Trevor? Good to talk.
Yeah, Kyle. I appreciate you doing this. So I want to talk about, I'm going to give a background for everybody just about this track real fast. So basically, in 2015, I had gone to Canada. I was trying to go to seminary, kind of overviewed this for people in earlier episodes. And I come back to Tennessee, and this track really picks up into that drive back in to Bristol, Tennessee. And I felt like in that moment, like I realized as I was pulling in, even though I knew the whole time that the only place I was gonna go was to a friend of mine's house because they were letting me, his parents' house, because they were letting me stay there for a couple of days while I worked out living situations in the area if I was gonna stay there or not. And I pulled in, and I had so many times pulled into that area and gone to the college that I went to, King University, and I had lived in this middle dorm on I guess it was the second floor of Liston Hall at King University for years. I'd lived there and in a big room by myself. I was an RA for like 4 of the 5 years that I was at the school. And so I was so used to coming back to that area, pulling in and having the space to myself. And when you're, the 5th of 6 kids, to have a room by yourself is a big deal. And so like there was a real like home factor that I had created in that. And it was, college is a really big time of becoming, right? And I realized I didn't have that anymore. And so I pull into this church parking lot and I'm just like scrolling my phone and just like really having this visceral moment of like, I don't know where home is. And I felt, I don't know, I felt disconnected from Virginia Beach. I felt disconnected from like the area that I had spent a bunch of time in on campus and kind of creating, home in the hearts of friends and things like that. And I just was I was just in this kind of like visceral reality of like I don't really know where this is. And it was a really kind of like shaking moment. um One of the lines of saying is like towards the end is like, God, I don't know what to do and I don't have any answers, but I have to believe that this is the work of your hammer and you're building something from this rubble, making something new. And so I'm like, I'm really like trying to hold on to this idea, like, yo, God, I have to believe that this is you doing this because I just got kicked out of Canada. I was not supposed to be back here. I don't know what's going on in my life, and I have to believe that you're doing something because this is crazy. So I know, you know, you've moved a couple times in the last couple of years since graduating from school, and even like coming from college and then coming all the way to Tennessee, and all those different things, coming from Ozark all the way to Emmanuel. Like, what, like, for you in those transition spaces, were those transition spaces for you something that was like, did you have any moments of like, I don't really know what I'm doing here right now, or were they all like, hey, I just feel like I'm on the next step of my life? Like, what were the transition spaces for you in these different like times of moving and ending up in all these different spots for you, like, man?
Bro, thank you for that question. I've been thinking about it since I watched your track a few days ago, which I love. Only problem with it is it's the wrong Civic.
Oh, don't tell these people that.
It's not, which was like so hard. It's a Civic, like it's the Civic, and it's like so close, and it's like but the color is like, it's like the same car, but it's like not the hybrid, like it's not, which is like so sad.
Yeah,
But
the
it
hybrid
was
went down for
everything.
the count. The hybrid is gone.
It's gone, bro. It's done. But well, and over the past few years, I've lived close to the Canada border, and I can tell you from my personal experiences and friends who have traveled up there, don't, you need to just be encouraged. It's actually a lot easier to get kicked out of Canada than you think. So
Oh, sheesh.
it's not just you. I guess they kicking a lot of people out of Canada. But Quebec, man, it's a wild place. But no, I think your question is a fun one, because when you do think about, I think that when it comes to the way that I've made sense of my life, or when I made sense of some of the moves that I've had recently, and just the way that we've talked, I think one of the reasons like we became fast friends is because when we talked about life, or stories, or just about things that we were into, we kind of put them in the terms of like snapshots or portraits of like of moments, essentially. And I think that the move is kind of a unique like moment that has its own kind of like, it has its own sort of story within the picture itself, of like frames and things. And I think that the biggest move that I think moving, I grew up in a small town in Kansas. Like literally, I'm from a little town called Carbondale, Kansas, which is like 1,000 people, like very small little town. It's on the outskirts of Lawrence, Kansas, and Topeka. And when I grew up there, I didn't want to. I wanted to go to KU, kinda, and I ended up deferring enrollment because I just didn't really want to stay around the area. I didn't really want to go. I haven't really talked to anybody I went to high school with since then, and it's just sort of this like, I just kind of wanted to go somewhere new. And I think that because I thought I kind of did, as you asked, like, how did I feel? Like, were they steps that built on, what was that like? And it was this sort of, I was like, that's kind of how I thought about it at first, was that, okay, I need to move somewhere, and I kind of want to just get away and meet new friends and meet new people and make new connections and try something different. And like, not a lot of people don't have the opportunity to do that, which I don't take it for granted one bit. And I certainly don't take that for granted, that I was able to have that opportunity to go to school in the first place. But I wanted to move away, and I certainly then at the end of school don't take for granted that I have two parents in my life who are healthy and still together. I mean, that's a blessing in itself. but there was a point like I graduated a semester from with a bachelor's. Like I graduated in December, and I had plans to go to grad school, and I really kind of wanted to do grad school because home was in a decent place. I wasn't in like too much crippling debt, and I wasn't in any serious relationship or anything like that. Like at some level, it was like a green light, and then it was. But in that space, I'd like just deferred. I'd really just like turned down a couple jobs because of going to grad school. And then I like all of a sudden, like as I graduated, got like serious reservations on what I was doing, and then like was really unsure. And so I ended up moving home to my parents' house, like living in my parents' basement for like 10 months, and like sleeping in my like childhood bed, right? Like like my mom, like, which is just the same way. Like there were like pictures of my like prom in this room, which is like, what is happening? Like, what did I just time travel? It's such a strange thing. And just living at home, I sub-taught at my home high school, like as a sub teacher, and like other schools in the district, and Lawrence and Free State and Topeka 501. What a strange time that was. And it was sort of this like limbo, right? And where I just like felt all the momentum that I'd had, or I was thinking that I was building, just like screeched to a halt. And it was kind of like, you know, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of things there, but it was just a kind of a confusing time when you have to sort of just rethink about what you're doing or why you're doing it. And so in that time, I visited a couple schools, and I was up in Chicago at a friend's house, and I just like had like 3 awful days of like college visits. It was like the worst time ever, right? And then I just like, but I was in a spot where I was making decent money. I was getting to save a lot of money. I had the chance to maybe like get a little footing under me, which I didn't really have before, and really was really unsure about. And then just like 5 things fell through, and I ended up going back on to like the original plan, which was to go to East Tennessee. And so, which is where I ended up meeting Trevor. And so moved out to East Tennessee with like not really sure. My car was straight busted up. Like it was an absolute like bad car. And then like not really much behind me, but I had a little bit of cushion, I think. And then like started washing dishes at a cafe and waiting tables, and like just going to school and trying to figure it out and make it. And so this is when I met Trevor Went, who's like longboarding with his like on his penny board by my house with a tripod, like heading out to the to the views apparently to get the evening light. I'm like, who is this guy with these like clean Cole Haans on out here? Who's this clean white Vans wearing black man in my neighborhood who is catching vibes? Like, I'm loving it. I'm like, he's probably like, who is this like busted, gangly, Irish looking white man in this nasty Oldsmobile? Is like screeching up in my neighborhood. But that was like, I think honestly, those are the 2 moves. Like, you talk about moves that have kind of shaken you. That move home in Kansas was absolutely confusing. Like, because I just didn't want to be there. Like, I mean, Kansas is like, it made me who I am. There's 2 people from Kansas. There's either people who can't wait to get out of Kansas, and there's either people who learn to love and like the simplicity and can like live anywhere. And I think I'm the second kind, but I definitely like didn't totally want to stay around my hometown. And I think that like be kind of in the middle of me thinking like, am I the first kind or the second kind? And like kind of thinking down on you know, people who leave. But it was this sort of like, no, it's okay to, but why am I back here? And it was just sort of a confusing time, I think. But since then, gosh, I got married in there, which like you throw another person in there who's also experiencing the same things. Moved to New Hampshire. We moved to like, since then we moved to Idaho out west, which is like a crazy view. But yeah, I mean, those are probably the 2 most disorienting moves. But the New Hampshire one was, since then, after Tennessee, when I met Trevor, moved up to New Hampshire. which is close to where my wife's parents grew up in Maine and in Connecticut, and going like retracing some of those steps with my wife had been with her dad, who's out of the picture now, which were like, you know, where she'd been in some of the exact same spots. And it was such an interesting thing because it was all new frontier, I think, for both of us, except for the parts that weren't. And that was sort of like, well, this was his home, and this was now this is our home, but it doesn't feel like home. And then, you know, and so I don't know, with some of that, it's been interesting to ask that same question for us of like, now we lived in Idaho for a year. I lived in Tennessee for 4 years, and then lived in Joplin, Missouri for 5 years. And then before that lived in Kansas, right? And so when people ask, where did you move from? You're like,
everywhere. Yeah, for real.
Yeah. New Hampshire, right? Like, I guess it's my driver's license and my plates say New Hampshire, but I guess I'm not sure. And so, yeah, what's that been like for you? You moving back in the rap, you're right, like in your word, you're talking about like coming back to Bristol, which is like where you went to college, which is kind of strange. I haven't really been back to the places where I've been to college since, except to go to a wedding. Yeah. And so it's been kind of like an interesting thing to call someplace home and then not, like, either to not move back or to move back.
Yeah, which it's interesting because like Bristol was never like Bristol itself wasn't home. King was, you know, it was like my college was, because Bristol was a small, I mean, I didn't have a car, nor did I have a license. I didn't have a license till my senior year of college because my mom, this is a funny story. I don't know if I ever told you this. So my mom had this rule where it was like the line of succession, because like you had to keep like 6 kids in line somehow. So it's like if you're in the car, right, the oldest sibling in the car gets the first dibs on the front seat. And so it's stuff like that. And so we had the same exact order of operations when it came to getting your permit. But my brother waited too long to get his permit, so he screwed up the rest of the line of succession. So I got my permit late, but then I didn't have anyone teaching me how to drive because I had to wait. My other siblings had the line of succession advantage to be able to get lessons of driving from my mom. And so I ended up getting one of my, it's just the way it was, and so like I ended up getting like my area coordinator, who was my boss as an RA. He gave me some driving lessons at college. And then I think at some point after that, I just went and took the test. One of my homies from college took me to get the test. And then like he would let me like drive around his car sometimes. And then there was a summer where I borrowed a car from a family out in that area. Shout out to the Fox family. And because like one of the daughters in the family, Emily, she was going, I think she was going on a big summer of different things. Like I think she was like working for a youth program or something like that, and then it was going on a mission trip or something. Like she was doing a bunch of stuff, so she wasn't going to be home basically at all, and so her car was just going to sit there. And so they let me borrow the car for the summer, which was super dope. And so that was like the first time that I had like autonomy, but I wasn't like it wasn't like I was spending a bunch of time off campus. Like I was still on campus because I spent a couple summers in Bristol living on campus, like interning at a church. Yeah, that's what I did. I interned for 2 summers. I interned at a church. And so, yeah, coming back to Bristol, it's like I had to become awakened to like, or not really become awakened, but really had to like encounter what Bristol was as a black man who is, you know, very outspoken on things concerning what it means to be black and race and things like that. And, you know, being on staff at a church and enduring racism at the church and all these different things. And like I knew, I guess I don't want to give too much of a spoiler of like what is to come with the rest of this series, but that time was a massive challenge for me. Really, just like trying to come to grips of like, one, I was just working part time at a church. I was living in a house that like I was like solo dolo, in a house that like my my old professor, like one of my old professors was letting me live in the kind of guest, like it was, they kind of created a space into like a guest suite or an apartment type feel so that they could Airbnb it if they wanted to or something. And I was in that, but the rest of the house was empty and they weren't living in there anymore because they were trying to sell the house and they had been trying to sell it before. And so I was just isolated. It was just me. And so my friendships were weak. I was isolated. I was dealing with a lot of like, what is this transition season? Like I expected, I mean, I graduated college with like a 3.93, and I'm a black dude. I was a vice president of SGA one year. I was, the president of FCA. I was an RA for 4 of the 5 years. What the heck else I do? I did like work study jobs, photographer, like did all these things, right? Had a double minor, I did all this stuff, right? This massive plethora of skills and things like that. And so I was expecting to get a full ride offer to college or to seminary from somewhere, because I'm like, I fulfill a quota. I'm hella smart. Like I'm doing all these things. Like I've got all the extracurriculars. Like this is incredibly better than my like high school accolades, right? And then like I got offered less money for like every seminary than I did for undergrad for a wrestling scholarship. And like I was an okay wrestler. I wasn't as like, I was an all-state wrestler. I was no state champ. Like I wasn't top 3. Like so it's just like, it's wild that like, with like my athletic success did so much more for me than my athletic or my academic. And so it was just like, this is a weird space to be in. And so, yeah, man, it was like super disorienting coming back to that area and being in that kind of in-between stage. And then really trying to like come to grips with like where I was and what I was doing. And then didn't know what was to come. Like didn't know if I was going to go to seminary still, and what was going to happen with that, because it's like, how am I to expect that anyone's going to give me any more money? And I think what I learned with seminary was like, folks who were like had previous like extensive Bible training or something like that, like their major was like in like philosophy and religion or something, and they were like some star student from university, or if they were connected to Milligan rather than somewhere else because they knew you were across the street at Emmanuel, and like so there was like some preferential treatment in terms of like the financial space. And so like the people who are going to get the top tier scholarships to Emmanuel are going to be folks like that, rather than someone like me who's coming from a photography degree with minors in biblical and intercultural studies. And even though I was the philosophy and religion student of the year at my school, my senior year, it didn't matter, because I didn't have like these lists of like theological credentials beforehand. So it was a really like kind of, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because I had promised myself I wasn't gonna increase my debt going into seminary. I promised myself that like, if I'm going to do seminary, it's going to be something I can pay for while I'm doing it, or that I have a scholarship, like a full ride to do, because I just had like so much undergrad debt. Like, even with a wrestling scholarship, I still, have like $35,000 of debt. And so it's like, there's no way that I'm going to like increase that number to something crazy and I'm going to be at $100,000 of debt, going into ministry. Like, that's stupid to me. Like, that's just like, I'm like, I would never get out of that. Like, I can't do that. And so that's where I was, man. Yeah, it was a weird moment, a weird experience. And I don't feel like a lot of people talk about those transition seasons and like how to navigate them.
Yeah, it's really strange moving a lot. And like, it's really odd. Just as you were talking about that, yeah, it is a different thing being like a student or being a transient, like knowing when you have like or if you have an end date on your time living somewhere, right? Or a goal or a target versus where it's really indefinite, right? You're like, well, I guess I'm going to live here as long as I work here or until they fire me, right? Or like until I'm like, what? And then you have this weird autonomy, right? You're like, well, I guess if I didn't want to live here, I could search for a job somewhere, right? It's like I have this like weird sense of duty or responsibility that keeps me from thinking those thoughts. Like, but it is this sort of like, you can think that thought, I guess. I mean, people do get one-way tickets places, right? But it's a very strange thought. Like, I guess I've always worked with like, my dad was an Air Force brat and like moved all over the country, like lived out of a van and like times, and just like when he was after, like, he was totally a psychedelic boomer. Like, we think the boomer generation is like the picket fence generation. No way, man. We forget that was the straight Woodstock generation. They did some wild stuff, baby boomers. But like, he was an Air Force brat and he never lived any place longer than like 3 years. And so when he finally got out, he moved a bunch with work. And then when he finally settled down and realized, like, when God got a hold of his life and he thought, he worked in the record business for Atlantic Records, and he was just sort of this, like, when, no one is retiring out of this business, right? Nobody's taking home a pension or like retirement and like having a family. Like, my friends are either staying in this business because they can't get out of it, or because like it's all they have and it's their like life, right? And so, or they're dying, right? And so he left and he was like, I got to get out of this. And so he went to work for literally the state of Kansas, like moved to Kansas, never moved, bought a house, got married, never moved again. Like, straight, like, guy lived all over the states, never moved again. That's where I grew up. And like, his testimony was silent in our home, but my brother and I like knew it. We were like, oh yeah. And so dad found a place to live, and he didn't want to ever move again because his whole life he'd been moving and it sucked. And so, but it's kind of weird. Like, I find myself kind of liking moving, but also not, right? There's this sort of like, it's also being weird too with like, as a newlywed, where is your home, right? Like, it's funny when Michaela and I slip, right? Or she says something like, well, like, oh, where is this thing or something? Oh, it's still in the attic at home. Or it's like, oh, or it's funny, like, if I mention Kansas and I say home on accident, or maybe it's like, well, where is home? Is that still home for you, right? Like, is your home still your mom's house, or like my mom's house too, right? Like, is this home now? And then will it be, we're an apartment, so if we buy a house, like, which is going to be our first home, yeah, if home is where the heart is, what do you say? Then I must be heartless because I don't know where I'm at anymore, right? This is sort of like, yeah, it is funny how connected humans and like are. I mean, you can even and you can spiritualize it too. You can Christianize it, how connected, spirituality is to the land, right? Like, it's really in vogue to like separate, like in the Bible, like, tease out the parts that are maybe connected to, moving and physicality, or like worshiping, and then the parts that are like spiritual. It's like, no, they're together for a reason, right? Like, it's like when you worship God, it involves like a physical element, and it involves a bodily element, and a prioritizing element that is like the right ordering of the mind, of the spirit, of the soul. And we shouldn't expect even, like this to be above. This is fairly common sense, right? This is like the right ordering, or like, recognizing the deeper, like, things happening behind the ordinary daily life moments, right? So like why are things and objects so important to us? Why do we take souvenirs from places we've been? Why do I like keep the certain things that I had in New Hampshire that make me feel like, that I keep with me now? Like I have a piece of birch bark that Michaela and I peeled off a tree, like when we first moved up there, like the first day, and I like have it in a little frame, and it's like this birch bark piece, right? And it's like, that was where our home was, our like first year of marriage. It was in New Hampshire, even though we lived with like people and it was a strange time. But it's like, that's like such a special time. We've got jars of sand, right, from her favorite beach on earth, Sebastian Inlet, and then from Rye Beach and from Cape Cod, and like some of these places where just we loved being. And it's like, then in Hawaii, and it's like, like what are, what's in a place, right, that takes so much of us, that keeps so much of us, or that we are able to like leave some of our life there as we take some of it with us. Like I don't really know what to think about that. It sounds like fairly poetic, but it's one of these thoughts that I've begun to think a little bit more about as we've moved again. That, yeah, I think.
Yeah, man. Keep going.
Okay, I was gonna not go. I was gonna let you just kind of. I don't want to wax too long.
Oh no, it's all good. Keep going.
But your thought for the day is like, isn't necessarily just home, but it's return, right? It's like returning home, or like returning to a place you've been that maybe used to be home, or maybe isn't home anymore, or maybe never was home, or like it's sort of this like, I don't know. I've got a couple of thoughts in my head. One of them is like this sort of idea that comes from early Christians in Ireland and like Scotland, which is this idea of, it's called, big name, it's your $1 million word for it. It's called peregrination. And it's this sort of idea that everywhere you go is a place where God already is or already was. And if God is the God that God is in Jesus, right? If God's full representation, the exact representation of God's being, the exact glory and radiance of his glory is in the man Jesus, then there's an opportunity to meet Jesus wherever you go, because he's already there, right? In this sense, that the risen Christ is already here. And so it's these monks in Ireland would like move to these places or these new towns, or in even like the Netherlands too, and like Frisia, they'd move, and they would, their prayer would be that they would find where Christ is already at work, even in the place where maybe the gospel's never been, right? So, but they're like, he's the lamb slain from the foundation of the world, so we might as well look for him here in their midst. And so it was this sort of prayerful idea of like, okay, well, where are we going to find Christ looking back at us in a familiar way, in an unfamiliar place? And it is a funny thing when you have the like, I think that's been a prayer of mine over the years of like, God, show yourself to me today in a new and familiar way, and also a different way, because I get really nostalgic and sentimental, and I like familiar things, but I also like new things and unfamiliar ways. And it's so, that's one thought. And so it'd be like when you'd go up to like New England or something, and I like want to go visit these places, or I like history a lot, so we'd go to some of these historical sites or something, this church where like so-and-so preached, or this like, pond where Henry David Thoreau wrote like Walden or something. And it's just that idea of some people have been here for years and years and years and years and years before us, but like there was a time when no one was here too, right? And that when you're thinking about just what's the idea of what's the importance of place in life, and like how when it comes to thinking about like how you're going to handle and how you approach and approach life and the like importance of spaces, right? Like you get this pretty well. You're like, your space is cool. I mean, like one of the first things you do is like you kind of like build a nest, like when you settle in to a place and you make a space where where you can kind of function and also, you know, rest, I guess, like where you don't have to think about what's going on, what's familiar, what's comfortable to you, you know, and it's that sort of thing. There is an importance in space and place and what's been there before you and what's not. Like why does it like does it matter, you know, when you were living in that dorm in King, it's like did you ever find out what dude lived in there before you? And like that's kind of like a weird thing too, is like, okay, who lived in this dorm room before me or this apartment before me, and like does that even change like how I feel about it, you know, or like who's been here before me? Like that's like you've talked just about living in the American South, like oh my gosh, like but I think the answer to the question is yes. Like does the history of this place matter, right? Like but even America, it feels like America's memory is so like young in world history. I mean that we then have to think about Native Americans, and we know so little about Native Americans, but also like a lot, but not in the same way that we know about like European history, where like you can walk on streets that were paved in like the freaking Middle Ages, right? That like Crusaders built in like, you know, Istanbul or like those types of things. Like you go through the Middle East and you're like, you know, this stuff is older than dirt, right? Like it's been here a long time. I mean, this is like, you know, early like African, you know, history, like Great Zimbabwe or these places like where early Christians, like the first Christians who were absolutely brilliant minds lived in like Egypt, right? And these Coptic Christians who just wrote like insane amounts of literature, like before Europe was even built, right? Like those types of things. It's like, how do you, I'm a nerd. I think about that stuff. I think about those types of things. I geek out on that stuff. It makes me think about it more, but like, it at some level, why do these things play into like how we feel about home, right? Or like places that are familiar. Like I've always wanted to be like, I love hiking, I love fishing, like I love being out in the outdoors. It's probably because I chopped wood when I was a kid, and just because when I was like, you know, I'd just go into the woods when I was like mad at my dad or something, you know, so I could just go be an emo kid in the woods or something, like I just walk around and kick stuff and like, you know, like chop wood. But it's like that's what I do. And so there's some familiarity in the woods for me, like when I'm just like need to release or like we need to relax. And that that's kind of led to, you know, being active and being part, like when you find a home. And so something I've always done, I've been a part of an organization that like does freshwater conservation to keep native like fish species and like native habitats clean. Like who are the people, you know, who kind of like step in the way when a new factory wants to like drop sludge right in the river? Like, well, they don't do that anymore because of organizations like this, right? Because we're trying to protect it. And that's like made me, I don't know. I think that like when you talk about living in a place, what's home to you, or like where's like, when does it become the place that you live at, is like, you know, I bet most people would be like, probably when you start engaging in the community, right? Probably when you finally walk into like a chamber of commerce or something like that, like those places that exist in every town but no one ever goes to, right? Like those, when you go into like the city library or like the city hall or those types of places for something more than just like a traffic ticket, right? Or like you vote for a county member or like a city commissioner, right? Or like city council. If you vote on rural elections, but like voting doesn't have to necessarily be the bar of like when do you actually live in a place. It could just be when you start knowing about the place, right? Like when you know a little bit of the history, or like when you know what these rivers are called, or what that mountain is called, or you know, why these streets are called these things. Or and I kind of like that stuff, and I think that's always led me to have like weird conversations with locals, or like, and I kind of do that because I'm a minister and I like people and I just want to connect with people on like a really like fundamental grassroots level. But it's also like, I mean, I kind of, and it's in a way like I kind of need that too, like, because it's something I think that ties in to make me feel at home. Like, I don't know.
I mean, I think it's like, I think that's a good point. because it makes me think about when you're just utilizing a place as a transition space, and a place as a no, I'm planted here. Like I'm building roots here. Like am I in transport, or am I building roots? And I think Bristol for me was like my home was like an attempt in people rather than an attempt in space. Like I'm a city person, man. I want to be in big city areas. Like I still at this moment want to move to LA, you know? I want to live in like LA or ATL or NYC. Like it'd be a really dope thing to live out in one of those spaces. Um, you know, I've got a lot of love for Virginia Beach because I feel like it made me, and a lot of who I am has been tied up in that place. But I think I'd be the type of cat like Pharrell who lives in LA but then like does something in the water festival in Virginia Beach, because him and Pusha and Malice, or No Malice rather, like they came up in the 757. Like they came up in this area. And so for me, Bristol, in Johnson City, even with Emmanuel and stuff, it was very much so a space of like, I don't like I was not viewing those as like, these are the places that I'm gonna plant my roots. Like, there are times where like people have asked me about like doing stuff in that area, like, you know, we need your voice in this area for this thing, or whatever. And I'm like, that's not my spot. Like I haven't lived in that area in like 4 years, and it's like that's not where my heart is. Like that's just not how it is. And then like, when you talk about space as well, space is a super important thing for me. I think about, for the Enneagram folks out there, as me as a 4, I'm a, like, for me, like my physical space, I feed off the energy of it a lot. Like in terms of like, if my house is dirty, I'm going to be lazier. It's how it is. If my space isn't designed well, I'm not going to feel as good, because in terms of like, if I've decorated, if I've made this thing feel like home, you hear people talk about like that sort of, terminology. It's like, if I have set up something with my stuff and made it feel like I actually live in a spot rather than I'm passing through, that's when there's a transition space for me from the position of like, I don't like a position that's just like, oh, I'm passing through, or I'm really trying to plant roots, or at least like, oh, my home is a sacred space, even if the place that I'm living isn't exactly where I want to be living. Like my home and my personal space is a sacred space. And I feed off that a lot. Like it's so important for me. And if I don't have it, I'm not gonna be as great. But even like Raleigh was a transitional spot for me too. It's like I've been in transition since I left Virginia Beach coming out of college. But Raleigh for me, it was like, again, it was another one of those situations where like my specific home was my spot. Like when I moved downtown, that was it. It was like a dream to live downtown in a city, to have like a dope kind of like modern design spot, to have all of my stuff in there, like, to decorate it the way I wanted to decorate it, with that kind of like Scandinavian style, but then add some monochromatic vibe to it, the very IKEA vibe in some regards, but then add my little touches. To have that space designed and laid out in a way that was fitting for me was one thing. But I think like Tennessee was interesting too, because like I felt like I had found a home, because it was like, even though I think like right now is technically the first time I've ever been able to choose a church in my life, because in college I didn't have a car, so I had to go where people were going in order to get to church. And I kind of chose to start going to the church that I was at because I was going to a different church at first, and then I realized that they were kind of terrible, because they just were. And so I started going to a different church with some friends, and so I kind of chose going there, but it was still like you're just choosing between where your friends are already at rather than, oh, I'm going to go visit 10 churches and stuff. And so and then I worked in churches after that, and so there was no real choice aside from taking a position. But it wasn't like I was sending out applications to 50 churches. It was like I happened to meet this pastor at this dinner, or I went to this church and someone offered me a gig. Like that's just how stuff played out. And so but I felt like I really liked the teaching style of the church I was at in college. Friends had gone there. It was the first time I was involved kind of deeply in a small group, because it wasn't in youth group as a kid because the church we went to was too far away from the house, and my mom's a single parent, so we weren't going to youth group because we couldn't be in youth group. We lived 20 something minutes away from the church. And so so I felt like I was putting in roots, which is probably why it was more difficult when I started really dealing with like the racism that I dealt with in that space, and like how unaddressed it was, because I was like still there. Like I had a car at that point. I decided to come on staff. I decided to walk into that space, and then I started like dealing with this stuff, and then it was being glossed over. It wasn't being dealt with, and things like that. And so Bristol in and of itself was like showing its teeth. Like it was showing like the ugly side of it and what it means to be Black and awake in that area. All the while there were still touch points of people who like you, who I meet in Johnson City, and we're still connected to this day, or our boy Nathan, or people that I went to college with. Like you've met my dude Hunter, and folks like that. Like there've been like it's like, okay, I can have connections with folks, but like I gotta get out of this area for my health. Like you don't understand, how much like I felt a physical. We had this conversation when I came back for school one time. I felt a physical release when I realized I wasn't seeing Confederate flags every day, multiple times a day when I lived in Raleigh. Like that I had switched from being in a situation where every single day I'm driving past stuff. Every time I drive past the Speedway during, Bristol Motor Speedway during a race season, there's tunnels of these issues. And I'm struggling, cut. And then I felt a physical release. I was understanding more on the line of what it means for like how a space can affect you, and how an environment can affect you, and how that plays into certain things.
How so much states' rights pride can yeah, here comes young Iverson from Virginia Beach out here to how you can drop. Does Allen Iverson does he not do anything for Virginia Beach?
Well, he's from Hampton, so he's.
Oh, okay. I thought he was from Virginia Beach.
He's from the area. He's from 757, but he's from Hampton.
When you said Pharrell and Pusha and No Malice, and I was like, how are you gonna say and not Iverson unless he doesn't do anything? I mean, all Virginia Beach ever did for Allen Iverson was the chair.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. Like this area,
it was grainy.
It was grainy.
Did he throw it? Don't know. Somebody's whipping a chair in the video. I don't think it's Allen, but he never went back to Virginia Beach, did he?
Well, and that's the thing. I feel like the area for him, I don't know. I mean, I don't know AI, but I would imagine there's some sour taste in this area because they really tried to mess that dude up. If you watch that
They did.
documentary,
So
woo,
it ruins home. It ruins home. So we're like, is Allen Iverson gonna return home to Virginia Beach? Probably not. Right? Like, is he gonna probably create a school for, you know, underprivileged youth like LeBron, and the shop for Akron kids? Probably not. Maybe that's just because Allen's his own guy and he's different. I don't know. And LeBron's a pretty extraordinary dude, but like, you try to slander a man and like ruin his career with a bowling alley tape, and all of a sudden doesn't feel like home anymore.
yeah.
Then your ex, like, so it's like, what is this like? Yeah, that, okay.
So here's a crazy thing about Hampton, where
Yeah,
he,
so
well,
young Iverson in Tennessee doesn't want to go to
doesn't have-
Walmart at night, and it makes sense.
Well, so here's which I absolutely didn't, and my mom was like, "Do not go to Walmart at night." And I took when we filmed this thing. This is gonna be a story that comes in later. But my boys, Paris and Dorian, who like helped me film most of this project, when we came to Elizabethton to shoot, or went to Johnson City and were in Elizabethton at that Walmart to shoot, they had not really internalized these stories that I was telling them. And so when we were in Walmart, they like we were in there for an hour, and homeboy had like both my boys had not seen a person of color for an hour and felt like there were eyes on them. And I just tuned that crap out because I had, it's survival tactics or whatever, but they hadn't experienced that. And so they were like shook by that experience. And we're like I was like, yo, do y'all want mustard? Do you want this? And they're like, I don't care, Trevor. We need to get out of here. And I was just like, yo, like I told y'all, like this is the area. But there was a level of sensitivity that I had to have with how they were feeling in that moment. But back to AI, an interesting kind of thing about Hampton. One, it's like 30 minutes from where I'm at right now. It's like in 1619, where the first slaves were brought to American soil. And then if you jump on top of that, if you've seen the movie Hidden Figures, with the black women who were an integral part of the shuttle launch, the NASA space launch or whatever, which I don't know if it was the moon trip or not. I can't remember the movie well enough to know that, but that movie, the setting, like where it starts off in the beginning, is in Hampton. Like it's out here.
Wow.
It's out here, cut. And so, yeah, I mean, Hampton had a terrible racist history, and it distorts the perception of a space, which, I mean, it's probably like why you see a lot of black people end up in Atlanta, because like Atlanta's kind of displayed as this like Wakanda spot right now. And it's where a ton of the movies are getting made in the world and stuff like that. Because it's cheaper than the tax that they're trying to charge you in LA, but then also like there's just like there's a lot of black culture and a lot of black folks who are down there, and a lot of people feel more at home within those surroundings. But yeah, I mean, it just goes to show the space of like how community is so important, and like building something within an area is so important. But then also like there's also the tension of a black person even coming to grips with like you were dragged to this country, like your ancestors are dragged to this country. This isn't like technically like where your roots are. Like you didn't migrate here, you were forced here. And so there's still like that tension of like trying to create home in a land. It's like, yeah, you're trying to create home in a land and figure out what you're going to do with it. Are you going to be on the Marcus Garvey Back to Africa movement? Are you going to be like, America's the only place I've known, and it's where my family for generations upon generations have lived and died and worked, and built families and loved and done all these other things. And so is this the place that I'm going to stay and enhance and develop and do whatever else I have to do to thrive and become. So yeah, dog. It's an interesting space. Which I like how you kind of pointed in on that of like how this track is really it's also like kind of pointing you to return and not just like home straight up, but like a returning to somewhere that might be different and and different from the first time that you were there, and what that looks like, and seeing a space with new eyes, just like you saw home with new eyes after college and trying to figure out that transition in grad school and whatever.
Yeah, because like things change, right? I mean, things change and you change, right? Like who goes, I don't know, maybe people do, but like who goes to the 10-year reunion at a high school?
Yeah.
Like I don't know, should I go to mine? Like it'd be a lot of work to go to mine, I think. Like it's like this year, right? So it's like it'd be pretty tricky, I think, to get there. And so it would cost a lot of money, and especially, but it's one of those, like, it's such like it's like, some people love that stuff and just connect in, but like for those people who feel like they maybe changed a lot since high school, or those, and then feel like either a lot's changed back home or maybe not a lot's changed back home, right? Like they're like, what this idea of returning, it doesn't necessarily like need a home. It just is return to a place that's changed a lot, like driving down the street and saying, man, like wasn't like this when I was here, and what then emotions does that evoke, right? Like what does that make you feel when you drive down Milligan Highway and Aunt Bee's isn't there anymore? Like, does that make you happy, sad, confused? What is that like, right? So, or what is that like when you go back to such and such and there's not a coal train rolling through town anymore, and it's like, oh, well, there used to be coal trains through town every day and now there's not, and now the valley's quiet, and I never realized how quiet the valley was because I always used to only hear trains and I hated the valley, but now I don't hear trains and now I'm noticing that the valley's really pretty. And so it's just like, or it's really quiet and serene, or just like, what when things change, what happens and how do you feel, are pretty, I mean, surprisingly, they sound like really simple questions, but they're surprisingly, some of the keys that unlock some like actual reflection. And so I like how when you do projects, you key in on like really simple stuff, like black aperture, or somebody with a westward adventure, or these like things that you've done or opulence, right? So sorry, not aperture. I'm over here straight noobing it out, but it's like, or just durag thoughts, like just talk about something really simple and like reflect on it a couple steps more. And so, I don't know, we're talking really long about a lot of stuff that you and I like to talk about, and it's like you and I catching up, which probably means that we probably should have caught up and then shot this video, so that people didn't have to hear us just catching up about stuff, and we could actually hear us talk about something like on subject. But it is kind of like that. I mean, that's where it hits the road, is like, what does it mean to go deep on something, or what does it mean to reflect deeply on something? Well, it's not necessarily, depth doesn't necessarily mean complexity, right? Or like just sophistication, right? It doesn't mean just reflecting on something with big words and more of them, right? It's like, no, it's purity, right? It's this sort of like, it's that like pure or simple, and not in a like simpleton sense, but like in a simple, like uncomplicated, uncorrupted, introspection or reflection, or like a reflection in a mirror, right? When a mirror is best when it has like the least going on it, right? If a mirror's got a lot going on with it, it's gonna give you it's like gonna be warped, and it has like, it's gonna be like a fun house. But if a mirror is simple, it's gonna give you the clearest reflection, right? If a window is as clean and pure a glass as you can get it, as simple of glass as you can get it. It's going to be the best, clearest, least opaque, right? It's going to be that. And so how do you, in the sense, like, yeah, how do you reflect on things like literally just the idea of returning to a place where you've been before, and then what that does in you and what that does those around you, like, is really the start of, like, I don't know. I mean, that's where good art comes from, right? Like, that's why good artists, like, key into the things that are, like, most relatable, is like, hey, I came back to this place in my life and it was strange, right? Like,
well, and think about this, it's like, all right, let's think about Olympic athletes. And like, most Olympic athletes will tell you that in order to be at the top of the tier, your basics have to be A1. Like, your basics have to be on top. And so, like, wrestlers will be like, you need to understand positioning, and you need to have, like, your stance needs to be strong, and you need to have good reaction and defense. Like, positioning is one of the reasons why Russians are such incredible wrestlers. And, like, one of our best wrestlers in history, Jordan Burroughs, lost 2 different semifinal matchups in the World Championship 2 years in a row to the number 1 ranked dude at 74 kilos right now, Sidakov. And Sidakov beat Jordan on positioning and got him, out of bounds to beat him by a point 2 matches in a row, 2 different years. Like, it basically cost Jordan a world championship on 2 different years.
I love this obscure wrestling analogy.
Hey,
this is what the people need.
Exactly.
If you're tuning into Durag Thoughts today, I just want to let you know that if you tuned in for obscure wrestling analogies, you got them. They're here.
Exactly.
They're coming up hot.
But it's like, to have like your basics, like, someone could think, well, I want to learn this cool high flying move. I want to do the flying squirrel. I want to, like, throw someone through the air. I want to do all these crazy things. But, like, at the top of the top level of the game, the thing that won the match was positioning. And so it's like, okay, if I have my roots, like, right, like, if I have my roots in a, like, you can, like you said, like, honing in on the simple things. It's like, you can figure out the perfect ratio to make lemonade. And you can also make some really fancy, dish that's in a 5-star restaurant. But there's also a beauty to figuring out the perfect ratios of, making lemonade with how many lemons am I going to use? Am I going to use zest in this thing? How much water am I using in this ratio? How much sugar am I using? Am I going to use any sort of simple syrup? Like, what am I going to do in order to make this the best lemonade that you've probably ever tasted, even of something so simple? And there's probably things that we can think back to in our childhoods of, like, something like, our mom or our grandma or something like that, dad, whoever, like, someone did this one thing really good and it was simple, but it stuck in my head, and it's the thing that I hold on to. Some people feel like Bojangles Bowberry biscuits are everything, and it's a simple thing.
Yes, like, the culinary principle is a good one, because it's like if culinary professionals will tell you, like, the key and, like, the point of, like, gourmet cooking is to not make foods taste like something else, but to make them taste more like the type of food that they are than you thought that food could taste like, right? So it's like, I don't want to make this turkey taste like chicken, right? Or I don't want to make this turkey taste like, I don't know, duck. I want to make this turkey taste like no other turkey you've ever tasted, because it tastes so much like turkey, right? I want this turkey to taste like you didn't think turkey could taste as good, like, to where you actually have to create a new category for turkey in your head, because it's like, it's so saturated, right? It's this idea that's like, oh, and ham, or like, I want these sweet potatoes to taste like sweet potatoes, right? And I want them to taste so good that you have to reimagine sweet potatoes in your head because you don't actually have it. They don't taste like caramel or like brown sugar or
Yeah.
like marshmallows. They just taste like sweet potatoes on steroids, right? Like they're just unreal. And so when you think about experiences, right, it's like, yeah, how do you reflect on something that when it comes to reflecting, is there meaning in tying one event to another event and saying this event was like this event, or is there like, yes, there is lots of meaning in making in that, and that is helpful, but like processing, and it's a counseling principle too, is like the processing of an event to where you get that event back in its sense, in its entirety, that's what reflection is about, right? It's like you're not going to reflect on this event in the ways that this event was like this event. Maybe you will, and we probably should at some point, but that's the later part. That's the more complicated part. The simple part is like, what happened here, and why was coming back to Bristol so weird for me? And when you key in on those things, they unlock the other things, right? Because when you actually key in on the nuances of like, why was that so disorienting, then you start realizing that, oh, it was like this, and it was like this, and was like this, but it wasn't just like the full, otherwise you just sort of like you just sort of roll through these like moments, right? And you roll through them linearly, or maybe you don't ever even tie strings to them. Maybe you're just like stumbling through life, and that's not it's okay to do that. Sometimes that's a cope mechanism. Sometimes that's how people just survive. But when you roll things back and when you start reflecting on things, the tendency is to reflect on too many things too quickly, or start processing a lot, right? Like free association stuff. Most of the time when people come to counseling or something, they just go, right? It's like, you just tell me about something, and then those like, just tie all the dots together, and you sort of tease a few out, and you eventually get down on like one or two main sort of things or relationships or points, and you want people to go all the way into that one and dig into that. That's what good writing is. That's what good art is like keying in. That's why like a painting like a Rembrandt, right, or like some of these like a Vermeer, like, is so much, even though half the canvas is black, right? Like half the canvas is literally black. The light that comes out in the canvas is more glorious and lighter in like the room than a painting that's like really bright and like neon, or like a Thomas, who's the guy that paints the like Christmas puzzles?
Oh, I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about? That are just like so like straight cartoony. Like there's like the light and like the lampposts and the snow. Thomas Kincaid, that guy with the puzzles. He makes that dude. They're like memes. Like it's like a meme of like painting, right? They're just like, it's like, okay, he's called the painter of light. That's like his nickname, dude. It's like a painting that's like a Rembrandt could paint an entire canvas black and then paint like a tiny little face with like a light in the eye, and there would be more light in that painting than the Thomas Kincaid, because he's focused it on one thing, right?
Yeah.
Or there's like a point of an album that sort of rolls, that then like has a space where it's like you're in the space, and then there's that song, or then there's that bar, or then there's that rhythm, or then those types of things, right? Like rather than if it's just all out there.
Well, think about Kanye's Runaway, right? That track that starts off with a single note on the piano, and then all of a sudden adds one more note, like, and then like continues before the beat ever drops. And so he spends a massive amount of time on this haunting note, and then it's like gives this contrasting note to it, and then lays it as the foundation of the rest of the beat. Or it's like how you hear rappers talk about how like, oh, they don't like how certain rappers will try to rap fast to mask that they're not talking about nothing. And so it's just like this impressive thing or whatever that someone's like, speedily rapping, but then you're like, you hone in on what the heck they were saying. It's like, that was a terrible verse. And so it's like, no, like the best of the craft are people who focus in on flow, they focus in on rhyme scheme, they focus in on a certain aspect of something. And then like even now, like some of the best of the game are these younger folk who are focusing in on melody. And think about melody in the space of music. It's like, okay, I'm gonna bring rap into this, but I'm also going to add a melodic sense that y'all aren't even thinking about. And melody is like, you know, such a building block of musicality that to be brought into rap was just, it was a completely different space. And so I don't know, the thing that I think that you've kind of honed in on is really kind of perspective, you know, walking into these different aspects of life and stuff like that. And like, you can modify your perspective in certain spaces, and you can kind of enhance I think like umami is the term when it comes to like food, of like, you know, like you were talking about, like enhance the flavor profile of something specifically. It's like you can enhance that thing, and you might figure out that like you don't really mess with, you know, this area, like how you don't how I don't mess with mayonnaise. If you enhance the umami of mayonnaise, I don't want mayonnaise to ever be tasted in anything. But if you enhance the, like, it's like getting down to the essential essence and roots of certain friendships, getting down to the essential essence and roots of faith and Christ and who Jesus is. I mean, that's why it's like, you know, Jesus says the gospel can be summed up like in these two things, or the law can be summed up in these two things: love God, love others. He's like this is the umami, this is the meat of it, this is the essential essence of this, and you can do all that other stuff if you just figure out this root, if you just really hone in on this root. And you can't fix bad roots, you can't fix rotten roots, but I mean, God can, but God's different. I'm not God, I'm Trevor. And so, like, you know, but to really like hone in and you know, recognize in a space, which I really had to come to grips with in that space of my life, is just like, I can't force people to be different than they are. I can't force anyone to be a better friend to me, or I can't force this area to be different than the history that it contains and maintains. But what I can do is find the people and find the right spaces to engage with and draw out the best of who I am and the best of who those people are, and you know, kind of grow and just see, like, with hope, like look towards stuff with hope, if like this return will be something good, or this return will be something bad. And I think people are going to have to, you know, watch the rest of the series to figure out what the heck happens in that return. But yeah, dog, I think we'll wrap on that. I appreciate you for your time, for your insight, for being able to see your face and talk for this time. Even though it's at a distance, it does feel like a little bit of a deja vu to a lot of our conversations back in the Emmanuel Village, so it's good talking.
Need to fly you out to Boise, man.
Bruh, I mean, for real, I tell people, like, if this vision that I'm aiming for comes to fruition, I'm gonna see people more than I've ever seen people, because I'm gonna be traveling around the country putting together art experiences and stuff. And so who knows, man? I'm not against coming out there and functioning and seeing y'all and breaking bread, and you know, I might even try out fly fishing. I've never done that, but I've seen other people's get active with it. I've watched people rock it out. Look, propaganda jumped into it. I might have to jump into it, cuz. Right, y'all.
Oh, man.
I appreciate you, Doug. You know, appreciate y'all listening to this. If you made it all the way to the end, catch y'all on the flip. Be easy. See you next week for the next episode in the series, Durag Thoughts Season 2. Peace.